Expanding to Austria was the right decision. Nothing beats this location. Austria is not only a nation with high purchasing power, but also a gateway to 760 million customers in the heart of Europe. Many companies here embrace open innovation. I can only benefit from this collaboration of know-how. When it comes to incentivizing research, Austria is one of the top players. There's a tax premium, direct funding, and most importantly, world-class research and development facilities. The price-quality ratio for companies is one of the best in Europe in terms of office rents, labor costs, and taxes. People are not only highly qualified and skilled here, but also super reliable and motivated. High motivation, I guess, or Austria's dual education system. Even coding is an apprenticeship here. I have to admit it sounds a little cheesy, but Austria really is a land where you can move mountains.
Hello and good morning, good afternoon or good evening from Vienna. My name is Matthias Adelwörer. I am Director Asia here at ABA Invest in Austria. And I'd like to warmly welcome you to our 5th Open Day, focusing on AI in Austria this time. Today we're going to be presenting you a very interesting program containing information on the business location, on the AI landscape here in Austria, as well as on subsidies. But before we get started with our program, let me introduce our Minister for Economy and Labor, Mr. Martin Kocher, for his welcome remarks.
Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, herzlich willkommen zum ABA Virtual Open Day, der dieses Jahr unter dem Fokus Artificial Intelligence steht. Artificial Intelligence oder künstliche Intelligenz ist ein wichtiger Technologiebereich der voranschreitenden Digitalisierung und auf dem Weg zur digitalen Transformation nicht mehr wegzudenken. Vorreiter im Bereich KI haben einen erheblichen Wettbewerbsvorteil und können sich besonders gut am internationalen Markt positionieren. Als Bundesregierung ist es uns ein besonderes Anliegen, Unternehmen und insbesondere Hightech-Betriebe bei ihrer Forschung zu unterstützen. Gerade bei den digitalen Technologien bietet Österreich eine sehr attraktive Förderlandschaft entlang des gesamten Entwicklungszyklus, denn damit erhöhen wir nicht nur die Resilienz der Unternehmen, sondern verbessern auch ihre Wettbewerbsfähigkeit in einer global vernetzten Unternehmenswelt. Mit der Austrian Business Agency erhalten Investorinnen und Investoren eine österreichische Partnerin an die Hand, die sie bestens berät und mit Rat und Expertise Unternehmen für die Ansiedlung in Österreich begeistert. Die ABA feierte erst kürzlich ihren 40. Geburtstag. In diesen 40 Jahren konnte sich der österreichische Standort als sicherer und innovativer Wirtschaftsstandort im Herzen Europas behaupten und mit der ABA als verlässliche Partnerin Investorinnen und Investoren in der ganzen Welt für Österreich gewinnen. Ich wünsche Ihnen einen interessanten Austausch heute beim Virtual Open Day.
A warm welcome to our next Virtual Open Day directly from Vienna. My name is Marion Bieber. I'm the Head of Invest in Austria here at ABA. In the next 10 to 15 minutes, I would like to give you a short overview and hopefully some surprising facts about our highly innovative and competitive business location in the heart of Europe. So let me now bring you virtually to Austria. Probably you know Austria from some photos like this one, our nice landscapes from summer holidays or skiing in winter. Of course, these photos and images are important for our country. They bring us in international rankings among the top places. Actually, Austria at the moment ranks number 2 worldwide for its quality of life. So you really work and make business here in an attractive, business location. But much more important is the fact that Austria is still a strong industrial country. About 30% of our GDP comes from the production sector. Tourism accounts for about 15%. The most important sectors in Austria are metal and metal productions. For example, Föst is one of the leading players here in steel productions. Another important sector is electronics, electronic-based systems. Here I would like to give you the example of Infineon that produces semiconductors here in Austria. Vehicle manufacturing, but also chemistry and food. Over many years, Austria's governments have recognized that Austria has to be innovative to be an attractive business location. And they have invested in research and development support for companies and research institutions. Thanks to this policy, Austria today has a research quota of 3.26% of its GDP, and the R&D expenditures have grown by 71% in the last 20 years. Today, we have our focus on ICT, also one of Austria's most important sectors. And in the panel that follows afterwards, we will have a special deep dive on artificial intelligence. ICT, as you can see on this slide, accounts for about 8.6% of our GDP and employs about 290,000 employees. The sector has an extremely high R&D ratio of about 15 to 20%. Austria is also an attractive startup and scale-up location. Just let me give you some examples of startups that have succeeded here in Austria. Blackshark.ai is a startup specialized on developing 3D digital twins of the planet. Last year, they received a funding of about 17 million euros by Microsoft's venture fund M12 and Point72 Ventures. Another example of a successful startup is Kaleido. They have developed the product remove.bg. They started here in 2015 and last year in 2021 were sold to Canva, an Australian company. Generally, we can see the Austrian startup ecosystem maturing. And just recently, we were present at the Web Summit in Lisbon, where an Austrian VC fund, Speed Invest, was nominated VC of the Year, lagging behind names like Sequoia or Excel. And two Austrian startups reached the top 10 in pitching there, MyReha and Biome Diagnostics. And Biome was placed second in the end. We know that international companies especially value the research and development location Austria. They account just for 3.4% of the companies present here in Austria, but they spend more than 40% of R&D expenditures and employ even more than 50% of the employees working in innovation and research. But let me now give you a short overview about Austria. We are quite a small country with about 9 million inhabitants, but we are also a very rich country. With a GDP per capita of 45,000 euros, we are among the richest countries in the world. Our economic structure is mainly comprised by SMEs. They have about 6% of the employees, but 62% of turnover and 60% of the value added in Austria. So let me now tell why Austria. 5 reasons why every year several hundred international companies and entrepreneurs decide to expand to Austria, setting up their subsidiaries here. I would now like to illustrate these 5 reasons. One of the most important reasons for foreign direct investment is gaining new market access and, of course, developing your company's customer base. With Austria, you find your ideal access to all European markets really in the heart of Europe. With within just 3 hours of flying time, you can reach 760 million customers. And at the same time, you have here in Austria, as I said already, a very rich market with a high purchasing power. And thanks to its history, Austria is the ideal east-west interface, and you can also access all the Central and Southern Eastern European countries from Austria. About 400 international companies have their regional headquarters in Austria and of course make their decisions for all their subsidiaries from their Austrian base. Another important factor why international companies choose Austria, and even more important in turbulent times, is our social and personal security and stability in all different aspects. Let me just give you one example here regarding labor relations. Strikes are nearly unknown here in Austria. Compared with an average of 49 days of strikes in Europe, Austria just has 2. Austria is also a very cost-competitive location. The price-quality ratio is really very attractive. I brought you here an example of office rents in major European cities. And as you can see, Vienna, with an office rent of 366 euros per square meter and year, is much, much cheaper than other European cities like Zurich, London, or Paris. And Austria is already a green energy champion. 75% of gross electricity consumption is made from renewable energies, thanks to our large network of hydrogen power plants. And the Austrian government has the political target to produce 100% electricity of renewable energy sources until 2030 and to make Austria climate neutral until 2040. Another important factor when an international company plans to expand internationally is the access to talent. Here in Vienna, you can find the largest student community in the DACH area as a percentage of the total population. About 10% of Vienna's 1.9 million inhabitants are students. And at the same time, Vienna is also the second largest German-speaking city. These students are educated by top professors in world-class universities. Let me just give you 2 examples of technical universities. In Linz, we have Professor Sepp Hochreiter, one of the founding fathers of modern deep learning and artificial intelligence. And here at the Technical University of Vienna, one of the recent Nobel Prize winner, Professor Anton Zeilinger, is teaching on fundamental aspects of application of quantum entanglement. What else can I tell you about talent? Well, we have a productivity which is 10% above EU average, and you will find highly motivated and productive employees here. We have a quite unique system of apprenticeships where young persons are educated in the companies and in the schools at the same time. And this system is also modernized. For example, about some years ago, the apprenticeship of coding was introduced here in Austria. You have also very loyal employees here. The median employee tenure is more than 10 years compared to about 4 years in the US. And you will also find people that speak English. Regarding English proficiency, we are ranked number 2 in Europe. All this combined with a flexible and modern labor law. The third reason for international companies is the innovation and ecosystem that you will find here. As I already told you in the beginning, Austria is highly innovative and we are a strong innovator, ranked number 8 in the EU. I would also like to stress that in the category intellectual assets, compared with the GDP, Austria ranks number 1 worldwide. No other country registers more patents, trademarks, and designs than Austria. Austria has a very interesting system of supporting R&D with incentives. And you will hear more about incentives in the interview that my colleague Birgit will conduct after my presentation. There are direct incentives by one federal agency, FFG. Their largest program is the General Program, where you can receive a mix of cash grants and subsidized low interest rates, and this program finances up to 70% of the cost of the research project, especially for startups, and then up to 50% for companies of other sizes. And there's also an indirect incentive, a so-called cash tax grant of 14%, which is applicable on the cost of staff and material, and also for third-party research up to 1 million euros. This cash tax grant can be requested with your tax declaration. This interesting system of direct and indirect R&D funding puts us on the third place in Europe. Let me now come to the last point, why international companies choose Austria as their location: our support. Of course, there's a support from the tax system. We have an attractive tax system with a corporate tax rate of 25% as the only tax rate applicable on corporate profits. And this tax rate will be lowered to 23% by 2024. We also have a modern system of group taxation to facilitate the internationalization then from your Austrian company base. And as I told you, no trade tax, no net worth tax, and no inheritance tax. And of course, you will receive the cost-free support from ABA. And we will facilitate and be your key to the business location Austria. As Invest in Austria, we have three main tasks. We promote Austria as a business location internationally. We accompany international companies in their whole process of establishing their presence here. And we also support international companies that are already present here in their expansion projects here in Austria. So how do we assist you really on a day-by-day basis? When you first get in contact with us, we will provide you with tailor-made information. So this can be basic information about legal and fiscal information, how to found a limited company here, but also market data and information about possible research partners here in Austria. If you decide to visit us personally, we will organize your fact-finding tours with all the necessary appointments for you. If your project then goes on, we will provide you with the cost data for the business plan, like labor cost or cost of the office or whatever is necessary for your specific project. We also help you in finding the right locations. There, we collaborate closely with the regional agencies of Austria. And we will connect you with the funding agencies and assist you in the permit process. If you're then looking for finding your first employee, we will assist you in how to do that. And we will always be at your disposal for explaining also cultural differences. So why something works differently than in your home country. So please get in contact after this open day with either with me personally or with my team. We will assure you to be your personal guide to the business location Austria. So thank you very much for your attention and enjoy the next panel about artificial intelligence here in Austria.
Hello and welcome everybody to the ABA Open Day. My name is Clemens Wasner from the nonprofit AI Austria and I'm the host of today's panel. With me on the panel, I welcome to my right-hand side Tamara Gerbert, CTO and a co-founder of Brightmind AI. Then the gentleman to her right is Martin Herdiner. He's a senior XR at Qualcomm, before CEO and one late co-founder of Wikitude. Then to my left, Thomas Moser. He's from Prewave, the head of AI. It's like a Series A startup, more to that later. And last but not least, the gentleman on my left is Florian Resch from ISD Cube, managing partner. Before we dive into the different blocks, I would like to ask each of you to give a very brief self-introduction of both yourself and the company, like 2 or 3 sentences maximum. So again, ladies first.
Hello everyone, I'm Tamara Gerbert. I'm a neuroscientist by training, then specialized in neurotechnology and AI technologies applied to neural data. Brightman AI is an early stage startup. We do non-invasive brain stimulation with closed loop neurotechnologies. So we record brain activity and respond personalized to recorded brain activity. And and our first target market is migraine, or the prevention of migraine to be specific.
Thank you very much. Then let's continue with Martin from Qualcomm.
Yeah, thank you, Clemens. Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Martin Herdina. I'm a senior director for XR at Qualcomm. So I've been in startups my whole life for the past 20-something years. For the past 10 years, I've been running a startup called Wikitude. We have been enabling augmented reality applications for quite successfully. And last year, I've joined Qualcomm as part of an acquisition. And now I'm running global business and partner management for XR and our developer and partner platform.
Okay, thank you. Then let's continue with Thomas.
Yeah, so hello everyone. I'm Thomas Moser. I'm the head of the data science department at Prewave. My background is in mathematical physics, and now I switched 4 years ago to Prewave. And in Prewave, we are trying to bring transparency to supply chains. We do this by detecting risks alongside the huge international supply chains, and also by discovering what are actually the suppliers of our customers.
Good, thank you. And then last but not least, Florian.
Thanks. Yeah, hi everybody. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Florian Resch. I'm one of the managing partners at IST Cube. We are an early stage venture fund, currently investing out of a 45 million fund dedicated to early stage academic spin-offs and founders coming out of university, coming out of scientific institutions. We like to partner early with our companies, oftentimes in the first funding round that they do, sometimes also even as a founding investor in some cases. We typically do that in 3 categories. The one is life sciences, the other one is what we call advanced materials, and the third one, relevant for today, I think, is the computer science spectrum. And what's especially interesting and relevant for us, I think, is where AI as a horizontal technology can kind of influence and thrive and boost developments in other scientific areas.
Thank you very much. You already provided the right keyword. We would like to make the first round to discuss a little bit about the Austrian AI ecosystem. This is, I think, now the 3rd time that at the ABA Open Day we introduced the Austrian AI ecosystem, and from our experience there were also lots of requests following up the event from companies that are interested in opening up a company in Austria and how the ecosystem works, like who are the players, who are the investors, and so on. And yeah, I would like to start this round now with you, Martin, because as you mentioned, you've been around for quite a while, especially back then with Wikitude. How did you experience the build-up and the growth of the ecosystem, both from an XR perspective and also computer vision and AI?
I didn't found Wikitude. I joined Wikitude in 2010 when it was like 1 year old. Our founder actually was the one creating the first ever created augmented reality application on an Android smartphone. And from a computer science, computer vision standpoint, it was very rudimentary. It was just like placing content on top of a geo-coordinate. So we've been using that for travel and tourism applications, for treasure hunts and things like that. Zooming out a bit, so this whole space was like pretty much following the hype cycle that you might know from Gartner. So really being hyped extremely in 2010 when I joined the company. Everybody was talking about AI, AR, Wikitude. We have been like on top of the Economist magazine. So somebody claimed like the future leading platforms globally is going to be Facebook, Twitter, Google, and Wikitude. And history turned out a bit differently. But as mentioned, so the hype was huge. But technology wasn't there. And then in the following 1 to 3 years, we really kind of fell down brutally. So it really kind of took a while to recover. We had to really kind of focus on what the value we could create. We had to focus on the business case. We had to focus on the end customer. we changed business model from an end customer application to an enabling application. And since doing that, things have been going quite well. And we've been like enabling AR then for almost a decade, and had like fantastic customers and partners. And since last year, we joined the Qualcomm family, still doing what we used to do. We enable AR, XR applications for a global user base, but of course optimized for forward-looking devices, for head-worn devices, for VR devices, something very exciting. So this means this allows us to kind of keep doing what we used to do, but like just in like a very kind of powerful and exciting environment within Qualcomm.
Thank you very much. That is very, very insightful. It's also very rare that you see someone that already lived through the entire hype cycle once and then still makes a very successful exit to one huge technology company. So yeah, if we switch sides, literally and figuratively, how did you experience the development of the ecosystem from an investor's perspective?
I think Martin provided some very good hints on that. And I think what we saw in general is a professionalization of the ecosystem over the last 10, 12 years, especially in Austria, driven by successful entrepreneurs, by successful founders, contributing to the ecosystem by different ecosystem players, giving more feedback, more input to the ecosystem, national investors, but also international investors coming to the market and finding an attractive place here in Austria. And I think that's the general perspective on how I perceive the ecosystem here in Austria. Specifically, I think in terms of deal flow, we see certainly very interesting stuff happening in Austria. So we're very optimistic and very positive on the developments here, once again. So Clemens, you're preparing the AI landscape for a couple of years. How do you see the developments from your perspective?
Let's say, I mean, of course, there are lots of things you could discuss. I think most notably, you nowadays have more than 150 startups operating in the AI space. So this is constantly increasing. What is perhaps important to note that unlike most other countries, you don't have, let's say, startup attrition. So it's very few companies went out of business in the last 5 years since we started with this whole thing. What is equally interesting, you have lots of large international players coming here. I mean, one of them is here on the stage with us. It's like Qualcomm decided to do XR here. But you also have this in other areas. You have this with drone navigation, Amazon. You have this with mobile mapping, Meta is here, and so on and so on. So you could say the ecosystem is maturing both on the startup side and on the corporate side, but especially also on the international player side. So all in all, it's very good news. This brings me now to the second part of today's panel, which is like the state of AI, both from a technology and a regulation perspective. Picking up on the last topic, I mean, one of the most important developments of the last 18 months is the European AI Act. And I would now like to ask some of you from the panel, what is your experience? How does the AI Act, do you perceive it as a, let's say, as holding your business back, or is it even potentially a boost for your business? So here I would like to start with you, Thomas, because at Prewave, of course, you're very reliant on external data, on web crawlers or social media data and so on. So how does the European AI Act in its current implementation affect you?
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say, knowing from the data science point of view what is possible, I actually very much appreciate it. And also as a company, for us, the ethical treatment of AI was always very, very important. And in general, we always try to bring transparency and make things better for people. And we mostly rely on very public information. So we are not really using private people information or something like this. So I don't think it will really affect us that strongly. But I think knowing what is possible, I think it's really good that there is something happening, because if you look at certain countries like China and what is happening, there you can see what can go wrong. Yeah.
And is this, if I may have a follow-up question, is this also something that your clients are asking, how you're dealing with this type of data? What are you, if you're following the GDPR and so on?
Yes, I would say retrospectively much more than I would have expected, maybe. Mm-hmm. But I think it's also because we do a lot of sustainability analysis. And of course, if you talk to people from sustainability departments, they maybe have also a view on this topic. So I think from this perspective, there's actually a lot of discussion but it's also a very internal discussion because it's something we really want to achieve too.
Thank you. Because maybe two cents from my side, when the whole discussion started, it was almost exactly 2 years ago that the first drafts were circulating of the AI Act. There was like the anonymous, let's say, opinion that this will be a big hindrance for the ecosystem in entire of Europe. What we see most recently is that many economies are following this type of regulation. So for example, India is working on something very similar, and Japan as well. And it was just last summer that a couple of Japanese corporates, for example, were taking a tour throughout Europe because they wanted to prepare for a similar regulation in Japan. And they wanted to have a look how our startups and corporates are dealing in Europe with it. So you could say from that perspective, it's, because you mentioned sustainability, it's comparable to environmental regulation. This can also become an advantage. But yeah, but maybe my view is too positive. How do you perceive this in your portfolio companies?
Well, I would agree. I think regulation in general can be something that provides a certain moat around the company. If you think about geopolitical developments, if you think about international startups, companies competing on a global scale, I think that can be a certain advantage to European companies in that case. I think more globally, the EU in general needs to be careful to balance that, right? So this is still a geographical discussion around the globe that's happening, and to create something that can be a role model, but also something that is not hindering European companies in their development. I think is important to balance those kind of aspects in thinking about regulations and laws in general.
Thank you. And last but not least, when it comes to regulation, question to you, Tamara, because I remember when I discussed with your co-founder and with both of you in the preparation, the two of you had a very hard look, where should you open up your company? More to that later, but coming from the regulation perspective, was this also a factor that you sooner or later realized would not become a problem in the long term, or was the AI Act a non-topic at all?
So I mean, we're a medical class 2 device, so we have to go through the medical approval anyways. There we have to say we're setting things up so that we can get approval in US and in Europe at the same time. And our focus is actually US because it takes less time. So the FDA can guarantee things in 6 months. That takes 1.5 years here. So our go-to-market strategy is actually to start in US and then Europe. But we don't see it as a hindrance. It's just one more thing to look out for.
Yeah, good in the medical space, that's true. This is like, if you have so many regulations to follow, then AI is like 2 centimeters on top.
Something like that, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you. Now, to not be too one-sided and just talking about regulation, I would also like to talk about the most recent trends and developments. I mean, one of them is looking directly into my face at the moment. It's metaverse. This is like all over the place since 12 months. So how do you experience or tell us a little bit about the most recent developments in the metaverse space? And if you also think that is still an area that is attractive for startups, or is it like, you know, a large corporate topic only nowadays?
So Qualcomm calls itself the ticket to the metaverse. Martin personally doesn't like the term metaverse at all. So in my previous life, I have been working in a virtual world startup, and we have been dealing with Second Life, and this was like 2007. And again, we fell down very hard that kind of hype cycle from the top to the bottom. Still, having said that, I think I don't like the term metaverse, but I think what's going on there is super exciting. So Qualcomm is heavily involved in pretty much all development there, ranging from VR, going onto AR. A new trend next year will be MR, meaning like VR devices with a video pass-through. The exciting part is like everybody was kind of talking VR down, but so far it's really successful. So there are a lot of people using VR devices these days. Trend is showing upwards very quickly. Having said that, there are many kind of special purpose devices coming out. There are kind of health tech devices like VR for therapy, VR for training purposes. Also AR devices are moving into very specific special interest purposes. So it's pretty exciting what's going to be there. Still, when I look at it like your face, we're still a few years away until we're going to have like end user AR glasses on our faces. But yeah, in parallel, there are now developments about kind of AR contact lenses, and actually tried them on. It's pretty exciting already. So yeah, definitely a very exciting developments happening. I wouldn't call them metaverse, but still like very exciting use cases that are being created in this environment.
Okay, thank you. So it's a good story for startups, and it's an even better story for my bank account because the consumer devices are still a couple of years away. Okay. So last but not least, what are the recent developments in your area? Because it's like natural language processing, semantic segmentation, and so on. So how do you see what's like the next wave of better understanding data that is crawled from the web?
Yeah, I think in the last years there were amazing progress in this natural language processing, really where certain type of tasks were first time really better than humans. And that's really also what you notice in working with the data, that it's really hard to verify things by now with humans because actually the model gets better than the humans. So it gets harder and harder in this sense, in a positive way. There are these very big models you get all over the news, the GPT-3 model and so on. They are really good and gigantic models. So from a business point of view, not easy to host. But yeah, I think even if you just take smaller, more specialized models, you can do amazing things these days. So it's a really great time. And also for startups and founders everywhere, it's just a time where the progress in these technologies are so much faster than actually businesses can follow up and producing solutions. So if you just sit down, there are so many ways of how you can improve things here that I think there will be much more to come.
Thank you.
I would agree. And if you look back the last couple of weeks, right, I mean, you could even see something like a Cambrian explosion with all this GPT-3 and stable diffusion models and all this kind of stuff. I mean, that's not years, that's not decades, that's not weeks, that's days, basically, where stuff is happening, right? And that can be, I mean, also to your point of the metaverse or other words you want to call this, I think this can be something that's very significantly contributing to asset generation in that space, right? So infrastructure, but also integration of, I don't know, additional senses, if you will, not only optical or visual senses, but also touch and feel, noise, hearing, all this kind of things. So I think this is a very exciting space, and I think there are a lot of developments where these big models actually contribute a lot.
Yeah, this is a very interesting example because Martin mentioned The Economist before, and just before summer, The Economist had a feature on these very large models like DALL-E 2 and GPT-3 is like text generation or image generation. And their thesis was that the large models will become future platforms, and it's like a winner-takes-all effect. You have to license these platforms. Just 2 months later, so less than 2 months, 6 weeks later, you have Stable Diffusion, which is image generation. You can download it for free, dear audience, and it's an open source project. And this is quite remarkable because for OpenAI and DALL-E, there was a huge waiting list. People were waiting there for like half a year and longer, and now it's out in the public. And you have this for GPT-3 or X with language, with generation and so on. So it's really a democratization.
And not only in that spaces, I think also in biology, for example, right? So if you think about what AlphaFold just published with, I don't know, 200 million protein structures, right? So that's basically putting 3D modeling of almost any protein right at the fingertips in something like a Google search, literally, right? So that's super interesting, I think.
There's even language models now that are looking at DNA data. And I think it's an interesting example because you're trying to analyze something with an AI model that you don't understand yourself. So unlike normal language, we don't understand DNA language. So it's I think it's a really exciting opportunity for us also to understand DNA better, to leverage these language models for biological data.
Yes, it's exciting times for AI, but why is it exciting times for Austrian AI? I would like to discuss this with you in the third round now. This is like, yeah, why should you open a company in Austria? But before I ask Tamara why you should open a company in Austria, I would like to ask Martin, why do you keep a company in Austria, even post-exit? Because this is an equally, let's say, interesting story. So what were the driving factors for Qualcomm to keep the team here? because it's also something we see from other companies. I mentioned Amazon and Meta before. Also Snap, for example, the makers of Snapchat, they also have their computer vision team here in Austria.
Yeah, true, and we know them quite well. So Snap and Qualcomm are very, very good partners. Having said that, we don't just keep the team here, we expand the team significantly. So I think we almost doubled the team since we joined Qualcomm like last year. Also, Qualcomm even kind of established what's called like XR Labs Europe. So it's like a pan-European initiative, really kind of having R&D for XR focused within Europe. So we have R&D centers in 5 cities in Europe, but like the biggest R&D group is here in Austria, in Salzburg and Vienna. And yeah, so on one hand, we had like the competency from 10 years of XR. So there's something that's very rare in the industry. Aside from that, we like being Austria. So we find good people here. We find high quality resources here. We have people from abroad move to Austria. They like the quality of living here. We work very closely with the universities. So that's a thing from a research standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint. So we support many PhD programs and then kind of try to recruit PhDs onto the team for our computer vision and perception team. So overall, it's like a very fruitful environment for us in terms of like specifically human resource capital and kind of quality of living.
Thank you very much. So now, finally, I teased it a couple of times already. Could you elaborate a little bit what were the thoughts behind from you and your co-founder to open the company in Austria? Because you basically really had the global viewpoint, like what were the main pull factors?
Of course. So yeah, for me, before I founded the company, it was not clear at all that I would go to Austria. I was in London and the Bay Area before. And it seems like a great place to start. So there are a few factors that convinced us. I mean, we had an amazing VC backing us with ISTCube. But I think the biggest point that convinced us to come to Austria was that the funding opportunities here are the strongest. So you can get up to a few million as an early stage startup here that is particularly relevant in medtech because it's quite capital intensive to have a product that's ready for market. So that was, I mean, that for example was stronger even than in Germany or in the rest of Europe as an opportunity. And there it's in particular the AWS and the FFG that have great programs. And then apart from that, high living standards, I mean, basically what you touched upon, right? So you have great living standards, you attract international team from our team and the people we're recruiting right now. Almost none are actually Austrian, so they're all migrating from different areas. We have a great scientific ecosystem with the ISTA and the TU Vienna. And and because you're in a small country, it's much easier to have visibility. So the network is together. We have an exciting neuroscience community as well. And so it's a great place to start.
Thank you very much. Just one thing to add, because you mentioned funding a couple of times. What you meant with AWS and FFG is like public funding. Yes. It's like grants. Yes. They can be very large, and this is also one specific agenda point for the ABA Open Day. So stay tuned. More to that, not from us, but from real public funding experts. Thinking of pull factors and so on. I would like to conclude this round by asking you, Thomas, because let's say being a large company here, that's one part. Coming here, especially with the tailwind of having the government grants, that's another thing. But how easy or / difficult is it to scale really a Series A company like you're doing? Because it's like a Cambrian explosion. You go from 15 people to 50 or 60. How difficult?
70 by now, so it goes fast. It's quite a challenge. I can just agree with what you said, Martin. Vienna is a great city, and we actually attract a lot of international people who come to Vienna. And in the startup atmosphere, we can really offer them a great place to work where they can really flourish. So I think it's really a bonus you have. That also Vienna and Austria, it's quite international, being also a smaller country. Of course, as I said, we have so many nationalities in our team. We try to hire the best people we can get. Some people you also have to hire from abroad, but that's usually also no problem. So I think these things really help us to scale our team to where we are now. And it's very exciting. Yeah, exciting times.
Yeah, thank you very much. I still remember the first time I met your co-founders. That was like 3 years ago. That it was a 2-person company. So now it's 70. This is a mind-blowing story.
Yeah, it's really exciting.
Maybe to add a quick data point on that, this summer we did a survey throughout our portfolio of 14 companies now, Prewave, Context Flow, Nista, and others included in that. And what we found out is that we have over 70% of international employees in those companies and over 30 nationalities actually. So that was really surprising, and I think that speaks to what you just said. Still, I think there are certain topics that need improvement, right? So just think about the red, white, red card, think about employee incentive plans and all these kind of demands that are on the table for I don't know how long now. So we can do better and we should do better, but I think in general it's an exciting place to join a startup or to found a startup. Absolutely.
Yeah, I can totally relate to that. I spent more than 10 years in East Asia. I was living for 7 years in Tokyo and 3 years in Beijing, but at the end also decided to open a company here. It's nice and you meet nice people, so it's win-win. So for the final round, let's say, we talked a lot about your success stories and so on, or what is, let's say, how is it to open a company in Austria and so on. I would now ask each of you to give one direct recommendation to the audience, because there are many people joining us today which have similar thoughts. Should they open a shop in Austria, or should it be, let's say, a branch office and so on? What would be your recommendations to those that would like to open a company here? So let's start with Tamara.
Well, I would definitely say do it. I think there are too few people with entrepreneurial ambition, and they should definitely make best use of the public funding that exists. And yeah.
Martin?
My biggest point is actually after funding to think big. So that sometimes so Austria is we keep referring to the small country, I think already 5 times today. But yeah, we're on a global scale, and you have to go out, you have to meet people, you have to partner and leave the borders. And just looking at Tamara and Thomas, it's exciting how big you can grow and be, and therefore so thinking big, I think that's really important as a startup when you want to take the next step.
Thank you. So what does the Series A company recommend?
Yeah, I think I want to say what I said also earlier. It's such a good time to really go with this technology and found a new company, because there's so much to do. And I think what I want to say, maybe as soon as you started a company, to kind of not give up and find the right place for your solution. So it's also always a bit of experimenting to find the right market and so on. So I think there's so much to do. If you find a good product, you find a good market, there's a lot to achieve these days.
Thank you. And last but not least, famous last words, Florian.
I can only agree to what the panel says so far. I think we typically like to partner with scientists wanting to become entrepreneurs or future entrepreneurs from the scientific space. And I think great companies in that R&D heavy, science-backed industries and developments, I think, can be founded at all times. And I think we are in a very exciting time. Cambrian explosion was a word we used twice, I think, today. So be brave, go out, do it. We are here to support you as well on this first steps to your entrepreneurial road. Come talk to us and go get it done.
Yeah, thank you very much. This also brings us to the end of the panel. I hope in the last 30 to 40 minutes we were able to, let's say, pike your interest in coming to Austria. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to the ABA, obviously. But you also got our names now, so you just try to ping us on LinkedIn or whatever platform if you have any specific questions regarding investments, neuroscience, and so on. So without further ado, thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the event.
Hello everyone, a warm welcome also from my side to ABA's Virtual Open Day. My name is Birgit Reiter-Braunwieser. I'm the Director for Central and Eastern Europe in ABA Invest in Austria. And together today with Michael Schmidbauer from Inspiralia, we are now going to look more closely into the topic of incentives for foreign investors in Austria. Michael, warm welcome and thanks for joining us here today. You're the Managing Director of Inspiralia. Can you tell us a little bit more what Inspiralia is doing?
Of course. Thanks for the invitation. I'm very glad to talk about the funding opportunities in Austria. As you mentioned, I'm Managing Director of Inspiralia. We are an international consulting group with headquarters in Madrid and locations in Miami, Cambridge, and Vienna. And I'm responsible for the national business in Austria. Our focus is to manage and organize grants for our clients. We are following a 360-degree service, as we call it. That means that we can manage funds on all regional levels, regional, national, also the European side. And we can deal with all topics which are interesting for our clients, which means R&D, investments, and also environmental projects.
Great, thanks for having you here today. Incentives, funding opportunities usually are always the most important topic for an investor. And actually, Austria is heavily used as a research location by international companies. Quite interestingly, while foreign companies make up only 3.4% of Austrian companies, nevertheless, they actually are responsible for over 50% of the Austrian R&D expenditures. So I guess there must be something to it. I guess Austria must be very generous in this respect. So please explain to us a little bit the Austrian funding system and who the main stakeholders are.
Yeah, I'm in that business for 30 years actually. And what I really like in the Austrian system, it's transparent, it's attractive, and it's predictable. So, and that's very important for our clients. In Austria, we have two levels. We have the national level with three main funding agencies, and they have a clear focus. We have the FFG, they are dealing with the R&D topics. We have the AWS, they are dealing with investment and financing and startup topics. And we also have the KPC, they are dealing with the environmental projects. So, and if you have a project, the first step should be to get in contact with these three agencies. And on the other side, we have this federal system in Austria, and every province has an own institution, and they can adapt to the regional needs of the clients. So most of the time, we are talking with the national level and the regional level, and then we can find most of the time very attractive solutions for the clients.
Sounds indeed quite interesting. What does the Austrian regime for supporting specifically research and development activities look like?
Yeah, that's very attractive, and I think it's unique in Europe because you have two possibilities for every project. You can first head for direct incentives. I mentioned the FFG. Or the regional levels. There you can get grants and fundings up to 70% for R&D. For instance, Austria has went up with the budget, nearly double the budget from last year to this year. For 2022, we have a budget of 1.6 billion euros. And in addition, you can get indirect incentives from the state. It's a tax-free premium of 14%. And normal, for instance, in Germany, you can get the one or the other. And in Austria, you can get the one and the other. So in most of the cases, we can organize funds for R&D activities up to 80%, which is a quite huge number.
So That sounds really very attractive indeed. So if you compare here Austria with other European countries, how does Austria fare?
Yeah, we can be very proud of our system, I think. We have a top 3 place position in Europe. And we are much better, for instance, than Italy or Germany. Only France and Belgium have more budget for R&D activities. And on the 3rd place, as I mentioned, we have Austria.
So I guess that explains why so many international companies also use Austria as a research location. Let's turn to specific projects. What are the main criteria to get your project funded? Do you have any special tips for founders? What should they actually look out for and take into account when applying for R&D incentives in Austria?
Yes, there are some main criteria to get funded. We have technical criteria and we have financial and economic criteria. The most important thing is that the project shows technical risk and technical innovation. There's a difference between development and engineering. Engineering, there you adopt the technical state of the art to solve a problem. That's not enough. There have to be risks in the project so that maybe you will fail. You have to show that there's the possibility that the project will fail. And the second one, you have to use the best technology which is available to solve the problems. Not solving new problems with technology of the 80s. So we have to be on this state of the art, on the edge, the actual. The second one is that you have to show that you are able to finance the project. It's not enough to get 70%, for instance, funded by the state, and then look in the future, okay, I think we can handle it in the future. No, it has to be fixed at the beginning of the project that you are able to finance the project. And if new companies coming from abroad, it's very important that they show that they are interested in a long-term position in Austria. We have different projects. They were attracted by the system in Austria. They want to come here, make a project, get funded, and then put away the technology, maybe shifting the patents to US again. And that's not allowed. You have to show that you're interested in a long-term position with your company in Austria. That's sometimes the main problem to get funded.
And I guess we should also mention, as we have international guests here watching this webinar today, that of course the precondition is that you have a company in Austria as eligible to apply are only Austrian companies.
Exactly,
yes.
Exactly. It's an Austrian program for Austrian companies.
Yes, it's also Austrian taxpayers' money.
Exactly.
I mean, there is also EU funding, but often it's also Austrian money.
Most of the money is Austrian money.
Okay. All right, then today's focus topic is artificial intelligence. Can you share with us a couple of practical examples from your daily consulting routine where AI companies have had successful project applications?
Yes, of course. Austria is not only attractive because of the grant scheme we can offer, it's also very attractive because of the level of technology and the scientific quality we can offer in Austria. We have a lot of universities. I think it was 1 month ago that the Medical University of Vienna and also the Medical University of Graz has achieved very high ranking. And in the last 2 years, we had a lot of projects of very high educated and experienced people coming to Austria, and they are interested in working together with these universities. And they first decided to come to Austria because of that level of the technology level of the universities, and afterwards applying for grants. Very interesting. It's not only the grant scheme, but of course, both together is very attractive for them. And for instance, there's a Dutch company. They're working together with the Vienna hospital, the AKH, and it's a very interesting system. I think the doctors, the surgeons have good ideas, but they don't have the money and the time to develop it on their own. And so the Dutch company found some IE experts, and they bring them together. And so a new topic and new solutions can be made. That's very interesting. And we were very successful, I hope I can say. We can manage that 70% plus the tax premium plus the investment grants for them for their investments here in Austria. We have also an example for a company. They are looking at the retina inside the eye, and out of video and image processing, they can realize if there is something wrong. So we also together the expertise out of the medicine and the expertise out of artificial intelligence together with that video and image processing, and so new solutions can be developed and also funded and granted very well on the Vienna level, on the national level, and I think in the spring this year also on European level. They are very successful. And also that's very new, a company coming to Graz, and they also are making video processing and analyzing out of blood. And they can, for instance, realize if you have a heart disease, only of image processing of the structure of the blood. So very, very interesting.
These were now all examples from the life science sector.
Yeah.
Are there also from other sectors?
Of course, of course. We have actually, I think in the last jury meeting of the FFG, a topic where a company, one expert, he's dealing with FX analytics, it's foreign exchange, and he's very successful in predicting how will they develop. But it's only in the past it was only his work, looking at the charts, looking at the numbers, the balance sheets, and all that stuff. And now he's together with also an AI expert, and they get granted in 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago. It's the same solution and the same picture as I told you before. Or for instance, Go Student. It's one of the unicorns in Austria. And it's quite a simple business model. They try to find tutors for pupils and students to help them learning and reaching their goals. And they were also looking how can they improve their processes through AI in searching, finding tutors, the right tutor, the matching the right tutor with the right student or the right pupil. And otherwise it won't be possible for them to scale up. So they are using AI to have a huge scaling process, and they are quite successful through AI. Otherwise it won't be possible.
Very cool. Can you perhaps nail that down a bit further in terms of numbers and showing a concrete calculation example?
Yeah, finally, always the numbers are very important, of course. Money, that matters, as we know. Let's take an example, maybe. I want to show you a cost structure for a typical example. We had this structure many times in the past. With personnel costs of maybe 300,000 euro. That's approximately 3 to 4 full-time equivalent persons for 1 year. So it's not much, but it's
the full load. It's the gross salary plus the non-wage labor costs.
Exactly. And then they are using their facilities. It costs about 50,000 euro in that example. They have to use materials for prototype or something like that. And they typically also use external expertise from university, from other AI experts, for instance. So we have in total 500,000 euro costs, and you can add 25% of overhead costs to the first three positions of the cost structure, to personnel, to user facilities, and also to material. And so for that example, you will have project costs of 612,000 euro. Additionally, maybe this company has to invest in building, in machinery, in logistic, in IT, of course, server, software, for instance, 500,000 euro. There we have a lot of possibilities to deal with such kind of project. First, we will apply for the R&D grants, of course. Typically, the FFG, as I mentioned before, it's the main funding agency for R&D activities. You will get there as an SME or as a startup 70% of funding, 70%. But not all is free cash. We have a cash ratio of approximately 30%. So that would be 180,000 euro. And in addition, a loan of 40%. You will have to pay it back in 4, 5, or 6 years, but you don't have to take a personal liability for that. Okay, we will talk about that afterwards. So you can get 70% of funding for that project. For the investment part, you can get about 20%, which would be 100,000 euro. And in addition, as we talked about that before, you can get that 14% tax-free premium. You will get it for the whole R&D project, and you also will get it for the investment. Because if you are using an investment in the next years also for R&D activities, you can get the 14% tax-free premium in the first year. And so in total, for that project, you can get 633,000 euro of funding, which is, I think, quite attractive.
Yeah, especially also looked at it from the perspective of an international founder. He doesn't have to give away shares. He gets this as funding for his project. Yeah,
yes.
Wow, very cool.
You're right. The Austrian state is acting like an investor.
Yeah.
Because he won't get any shares, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
He is funding 80% of the project. And to talk about the loan, if you fail in your project, you cannot manage the technical risks.
Yes.
Then you can switch to a grant. You don't have to pay it back.
Wow.
If you're failing it due to technical risks.
Very impressive. Finally, what is also very important to applicants, I guess, is can you tell us a little bit more about success rates, perhaps in general, and what you see also thanks to your practical experience, the projects that you're accompanying?
I have to repeat it. I really like the Austrian system because it's transparent, it's attractive, and it's very predictable. All the agencies are acting on specific programs, and there you can see the criteria, how they decide in detail. And if you're used to work with that programs, and I'm doing that for nearly 30 years, then you get a good feeling if we have a chance to be successful or not. We're putting a lot of effort in the validation process, it's called in our company. So we take a close look at the projects. We invest sometimes 1, 2, maybe 3 days to be sure to have a good chance to be successful. We have 4 typical business units. We are dealing with the investment grants. There we have 95% success rate. We have dealing with the environmental grants, also 95% success rate. The tax incentives, the 14 tax-free percent, also 95%. We are doing that for now 10 years, and we are very experienced in that field. And the most complicated thing is R&D, because you have to to look at the state of the art. You have to know on what level are your competitors. And you don't know it in every case. So in that field, we have 85%. In this year, we are very proud. We have 95% actually, because we are only facing one rejection actually due to commercial topics. And normally we are calculating with 85%. So it's very predictable. That's very important.
But I guess, especially when you do it for the first time, it's good to have an advisor, a consultant who helps you do all this and who, as you also pointed out at the beginning, really validates the idea and gives kind of an assessment whether or not how good the chances are in being successful, right?
Yes, I do think so. A lot of people compare it with a jungle, the system of grants, because you cannot see all the risks and the dangerous things. So I think if you're just starting with such project, you should talk to a consultant and to experts.
Well, thanks, Michael, for giving these insights. Thanks everyone for joining today our webinar. You have gotten our contact details. Michael, on behalf of Inspiralia, and I, on behalf of ABA, certainly would be happy to be in direct touch and to answer any concrete inquiries, whether you send us an email or whether you want to schedule a direct call, anything's possible. And we look forward to hopefully getting many interesting research projects that you'd like to implement in Austria. With that, I say thank you, and let's be in touch.
So that's been it. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for joining us today. I hope you had an interesting event with some inputs that might help you choose the business location Austria. Me and my colleagues from ABA are very much looking forward in getting in touch with you, answering your questions, and of course, discussing your investment projects. Thank you and bye-bye.